Good morning. So we were talking about Nanyang Technological University, but the tech seems to be failing us today, embarrassingly so, and I want to apologize for that experience. Today we're going to share a lot on data points. So two things I want to share. First is that we talk a lot about the well-being of students, but that's our business, right? Our business is institutions, Institute of Higher Learning. When we are educators, you always think about the student first. Then we forget about the staff to a large extent. And it was only in COVID lockdown that we suddenly realized that, hey, this is one area that we have particularly underinvested for many, many years. And there are more studies that have shown that if you were to improve the well-being of staff, the well-being of students is directly and indirectly affected too, positively in many ways. So even in the Okanagan Charter or in the UK, in the context of UK, okay, Okanagan Charter comes from North America, right? So we have that to guide implementation. In the context of the UK, you have the UK Mental Health Charter too. In the context of Down Under, which is Australia, you have the Oregon or RYGEN, which is also known, they just call it the Mental Health Framework. And that guides the implementation of mental health and well-being initiatives and implementation in Australia and New Zealand. In the context of ASEAN, we actually have the ASEAN University Rating System too. So the four places, if you were to put them into quadrants, we actually have got various frameworks in place. And they are very similar. All of them also talk about investing for staff well-being. And that's an area that we want to spend a bit of time in. Because in many university conferences that you talk about, you always talk about student well-being, but there are so little opportunities for talk about staff. Second item, can you measure well-being? And that's probably where what I'm trying to do is to talk about staff well-being and to tell you and to share with you whether or not well-being can be measured. You know, we talk about health and well-being. Health, we know how to measure, right? Blood pressure, glucose, cholesterol, and then therefore we know the status of health of the person. But well-being, how do you measure? We all know that it is a construct. We know that it's important, but then how to actually say that? How do you translate it into return on investment or value on investment? So a bit of a background about me is that I'm a medical doctor by training, went into this specialty known as occupational health. But even then, I'm a dropout too. So I didn't complete the occupational health training program, so I can't call myself a specialist. But in the case of what I would like to do is that I got swept up in the transformation of health and well-being in the industry when I was working in GSK and then subsequently in Meta. I started to learn so much about what the private sector is doing. And then in 2020, I went to join NUS as to set up the Health and Wellbeing unit. In the context of NUS, we talk about the ecosystem, 12,500 staff and 48,500 students, and the student number is increasing. We are probably likely going to be 50,000 students by next year. And total ecosystem is about 60,000, approaching 61,000 ecosystem. A single member constituency ward in Hougang is only 29,500. Single constituency membership in Potong Pasir is only 30,000. You combine these two together, still lesser than us. All right. And in the constituency, you will have what? Supermarket and hospital, clinic, and all these things, right? So the same thing too in the context of university. You will have clinic, you will have counseling, you will have supermarket, you will also have accommodation too. So this kind of like tell you how the University of NUS is kind of like set up. This is the org chart. We probably have one of the largest counseling and also the health and well-being units in Asia Pac. Not really in the world, because we know that in the context of many other universities, they are larger than us, and therefore their members are also bigger. But if you were to look at that, right, I got 74 people in my team. In terms of headcount, more than 60 are counselors, psychologists, and case managers. And we have approximately I think we're probably reaching 9 already in terms of our program management. So they do a lot of upstream staff program outreach work. And then we have this growth and partnerships team that is working with the government agencies and also external companies in trying to do what we call capability sharing and transferring to the respective units who wants to learn from us. But yeah, at the same time, we can't be using our existing team because they are really, really saddled with the workload of caring for the community. So we set up a different team to help do the capability sharing and transfer. One of our partners, of course, is Army. And we potentially can, I don't think we're going to share that today, of course, but those are some of the collaborations that we have with the government's agency. We are ranked number one in Asia, and if globally, we tend to look at this rating. This one we try not to see because we find this to be more accurate. Yeah, and why am I sharing this is because when you are ranked number one in Asia, it is a problem. The problem is that you tend to then get the best in the region to come and join you, and that usually sets up yourself into a very stressful environment. Whether is it from a staff perspective, a research perspective, and also student perspective, highly competitive. And that resulted in a lot of mental health challenges, which is also a reason why, if you were to compare, for example, Yale University, Stanford University versus a college, Boston College University, as an example, you'll find that the staffing ratio of counselor to student gets higher and higher, or rather, you get more staffing ratio in the top tier university compared to the less top university. It's because of the nature of the stress that the students themselves generated. And you also have a selection bias. The community becomes a lot more anxious, tight. When you're best in your respective country, you come to places where everybody is best, you become average. It is very problematic for some of our students to accept. And this is where it becomes an issue. So with such an ecosystem of two single-member constituency size, right, you need to approach then well-being systematically. So how do we approach it? We develop first thing, what we call the wellness framework or the WellNUS framework. It is available online to adopt accordingly. So let's take a look. How do we do it? First, we map out the capacity of the person, right? Most of us are well. Some of us are not sleeping well. Like for example, Justine, I believe that she is not so stressed out. And also she has not been sleeping well for the whole week, but she is still productive. All right, she is at risk but productive. But some of us who are clinically unwell and therefore you're absent, and some of us are on the journey of recovery. So this is what we call the well-being continuum or the well-being spectrum. So once you map out a person's well-being continuum, you start to take a look at the different level from a senior leader perspective, HR, Health and Wellbeing unit, students, bodies, and then you start to look at culture, strategy, the infrastructure, and the support service system. And that's when everybody has a role to play because it involves everybody. So at the top level, at least you must have a centralized committee to allocate resources and strategize. And then you start to take a look at whether or not, if you were to implement peer support system, right, which community actually are we benefiting? And you start to realize that it's only benefiting people who are at risk. But for people who are unwell, then we need to take a look at the insurance program to ensure that the exclusion towards the mental health support is lifted. And for people who are in the journey of recovery, peer support, EAP coaching, they will not help you. You do need a return to work mental health services. And we're so glad to partner with NCSS to roll out what we call the return to work training program. And we continue to want to do that for the benefit of Singapore. But some people will say, hey, what about NetPod? What about gym? Can we have more of this or not? I say, sure, I can. It makes the slide a bit busier, but it is important to know. Then you start to realize that quiet corner, NetPods and gym, they're helpful for people who are well or at risk. But for people who are unwell, I think you might benefit from a bit of an in-house company mental health clinic. So this is a framework for you to prioritize some of the initiatives that people come and say that, hey, why don't you do this? Hey, why don't you do that? I say, let's map it out, Lord. So this is helping the population that's over there. Is that your priority right now? And then this is what we call the one slide that shares it all. One slide to illustrate what is the whole of campus approach to well-being is like. You got HR initiatives, you got safety initiatives, you got student initiatives, all placed together in one slide. And then you color code it. And then in one slide, you can show the heat map to your senior leaders. What does it mean in terms of a whole of campus approach to well-being? So you might want to consider wellness framework because it helps to allocate tasks and responsibilities to all the cross-functional units. Let's take a look about the impact. A lot of people will say that, okay, we have invested so much money already. What is the return on investment or value of investment? So the concept of measuring the ROI, let's talk a little bit about return on investment first. So there are so many factors in place. The more what you call that factors you try to put in, right? So you start to have those that have got direct costs. The vendor costs this amount of money, so that is a direct cost already, right? And then as you move towards the center part, you start to have more indirect costs like manpower costs, software technology, or attrition rate. Attrition rate also got cost, but it becomes more fluffy already. How do you calculate that out? And then you start to talk about presenteeism. Can you measure or not from a return of investment perspective? Presenteeism is because the person really appear in the office, still doing some work, but not to the best capability. But can you measure presenteeism? And then lastly, opportunity cost, engagement cost. How do you even measure that? So you start to see that there's a direct cost and indirect cost putting together in a spectrum. So the thing is, the more items, the more indirect costs you put in, right, you tend to get higher ROI. But of course, it is prone to criticism. People start to ask you about the model. Is it true or no? You start to put in so many fluffy items to inflate the ROI. Or you want to be more conservative and say that, okay, we just look at the rental cost, the vendor cost, and the cost of the manpower. You tend to get lower return on investment, but it's higher acceptance, less criticism. So we understand, right, this concept of ROI. So let's take a look at some of the examples how we measure ROI. We wanted to put into coaching. In the context of Singapore, we have the largest counseling center among all the universities already. But we are still hitting record number of counseling requests. We have never had so many counseling requests before. Our counseling request is exceeding 10,000 per year already. And that's just requests only, not even the follow-up. You see? So if you take a look from that perspective, should we continue to hire more? We hire more means we take from you already, You see, because the number of counselors in the context of Singapore is so small, right? And so limited. So we cannot continue to hire, and therefore we decided to go into coaching. Why did we want to go into coaching? Because when you look at the 10,000 counseling requests, 40% are actually low risk. There are issues pertaining to skills equipping problem, procrastination, time management, and therefore you fail to manage that anxiety coming, then you use my counseling to manage your emotions. But the root cause is your skills. Then, of course, you have 30%, 20%, and 10% who are at different levels of anxiety level. So we found that up to 40% of our students, for the reasons we encounter in the areas of skills equipping, right? And we decided to go into coaching. And the services went live in November. So looking at the data points, right? So the blue bar are the counseling numbers in the respective months, January, February, March. So the blue is 2023. What I'm going to show you over here is 2024. You see the subsequent increase in the number of counseling requests. But thankfully, the counseling requests, many of them were absorbed by the orange bar, which is the coaching. So if we have not rolled out coachings and outsourced it out to this vendor that we use is Intellect, if we did not outsource it out, our counselors would have to manage this load, and many of them would then will experience burnout issues. So Intellect was the vendor that provided this. And then when we take a look, right, the increase in the number of counseling requests is equivalent to hiring 3 more counselors. We look at the median salary of how we pay our counselors and that of NCSS guideline, and versus the contract that we pay. So it's a direct cost comparison. So the cost of hiring 3 counselors at the NCSS guideline level, and then versus the contract value that we are engaging Intellect for to provide the coaching, the return on investment is 2.26. So which means for every $1 that I have implemented in the context of Intellect, I have helped the university save about $2 by rolling out coaching in the face of increasing counseling requests. So that's one area of measuring your return on investment, direct cost comparison. The second, ROI is a bit more complex. Usually you start to see them in publications like the Deloitte Insights. They will tell you that, oh, this is a $4.10 for every $1 that you invest in it. This is some of the data that is shown in Bell Canada, that for every $1 that they invest in the well-being services to improve the well-being of the staff, you get back about $4.10. But they measure a lot of indirect costs, so it gets a little bit complicated to interpret. That being said, if you have a chance to download this report, try to read it. It's published in 2019, but it's still relevant because there are some nuggets of gold. Let's take a look at 2 pointers that they share. Companies whose program in place for 3 or more years, median ROI is $2. Programs are more likely to deliver greater return as they mature, rather than yielding immediate financial benefits. Indeed, achieving ROI positively can take 3 or more years. Magic number, 3 or more years, okay? Second, you need to invest along the entire spectrum of mental health, from promotion to intervention and care, which is what we talk about in the wellness framework, right? The wellbeing continuum. So all the continuum, you do need to invest in it. So what is the learning point over here? Is that mental health master plan, you need to have a master plan. It must be at least 3 years. So you heard about NTU saying about 5-year master plan. You heard from UBC, 5-year master plan. And I think that is important. Having a master plan, you also need to ask them to ring fence your budget. If you don't ring fence your budget, cannot, a bit hard. The data that you're going to see in the subsequent slide took me 3 years to get it out, because it takes some time to yield the returns. And then from there, you are able to illustrate the impact better. So what about value on investment? Because it is less intuitive, but it still can be very powerful in terms of storytelling. Let me share some of the insights using staff wellbeing program, to illustrate how we use that to storytell. First thing is a psychological safety and impact. We know about psychological safety. We heard it so much about it because the Google Aristotle project talked about psychological safety being the most important factor in a very highly efficient team. So we know about this for a long period of time. Question is, how do you measure that to impact? So your departments or dean say that, okay, I want to have good psychological safety. Does that mean I need to pay more? Then what does it mean in terms of the output, right? So for the first time, we are able to indicate and illustrate that the construct of relationship in the workplace has got the most powerful, impact to the psychological safety climate in a team. Let's take a look up. The odds ratio of 6 indicates that people with high relationship score are 5 times more likely to have high psychological safety score compared to those with a low relationship score, right? So that's why don't ever underestimate the power of team bonding, in-person conversation, go out for a bit of a beer time. Yeah, so we have learned that whiskey helps from our friend over there. Sometimes we do need more whiskey in our life, and that's a good well-being drink. So I think we should probably use that as an opportunity to build up goodwill. But in-office relationship is the most powerful factor in improving psychological safety in a team. We also found that people from departments who promote mental health are 2.5 times more likely to have higher PERMA score. PERMA is a positive functioning at work. It is a surrogate measure in terms of engagement and how productive the person is also. 2.5 times more likely to have high PERMA score compared to departments who are not. So the departments or the HOD only need to mention and encourage people to use the mental health resources. And your employees are already 2.5 times more likely to have a higher engagement score already. So it's not a very difficult thing for your head of departments to do, just by only illustrating what the resources they are. We found that staff from departments promoting mental health resources are also 8.4 times more likely to seek help than those departments that don't. We are in the context of Asia country, and then there is that Asian shyness and stigma that is prevalent. So in that context, how do you actually get your staff to come out to seek help? Just again by promoting mental health resources. We also found that respondents who indicated their department promoted mental health resources this year are more likely to have improved anxiety, depression, and PERMA scores in 2024 compared to 2023. Our data is longitudinal. It actually tracks down to the individual level, but we mask the data. So we know we are able to see whether the person got promoted, what's the job grade, and including the salary, and then versus their well-being score. And then year on year, there are changes. This is one of the ways that we have learned, because I learned this when I was in Facebook and GSK. They have been doing all this data for a long time. But for the first time, we have 3 years consecutive of our staff data points, 2023, 24, 25, and you start to see how it changes compared to what they have done. So even your department promoting mental health, just by promoting only, just by promoting, you start to see that there's improved anxiety, depression, and PERMA scores already. It's so easy, right? Just promoting, and then subsequently the health of your staff actually improve. Now, this is a very interesting HR domain. You start to look at the table, attrition. We're talking about attrition. This is the all types of attrition, and then there's regrettable attrition, and then there's non-regrettable attrition. And then, of course, you start to see all the value here, they are negative. The most powerful negative is meaningfulness. Meaningfulness in terms of preventing staff attrition is the most powerful retention tool. So that also means that how can our leaders storytell to help remind our colleagues that the work that they're doing is meaningful? And that helps them to want to work for you and continue working for you, and not dangled by 10% or 20% more salary just because another industry is working. The meaningfulness of a person's job is a very, very powerful construct that we need to always remember. But storytelling is one that helps to deliver and connect the task at hand towards the meaningfulness of the work. We found that the odds ratio of respondents who scored higher in well-being metric in staying in NUS after a year. So which means, taking a look, anxiety and depression. So if you score better, or which means you are more likely to score lower in anxiety or depression, you are 100% more likely to stay NUS beyond a year or continue staying on. So, which means if you were to improve the well-being metrics of your employees, it is also, again, another powerful retention tool. By improving their anxiety, depression score, and their engagement score, your psychological safety has 53% higher likelihood of retaining your staff too. So psychological safety is important. And we use that to illustrate towards our departments to say that you do need to invest in this concept known as psychological safety, because it has shown to improve your talented individuals. We found that odds ratio of respondents who score higher in well-being also have better performance rating. Now, this is for the first time we start to see that people who are score higher in psychological safety, they're 38% more likely to score exceed requirement or excellent in your performance grade too. So psychological safety does help improve the performance of your respective colleagues. Of course, some people may argue that, the people who perform well are the ones who feel safe to perform. But it is a relationship that we know that it is important to do. But what our data can do is that because it's longitudinal, you are able to see the cause and effect more. So which means that if the psychological safety were to slowly start to improve and then the person start to have a better performance grade, we are able to illustrate it out. But if your survey data has always been anonymous right from the start, you will not be able to illustrate that at all. So you might want to think about the structure of how you collect your data points among your staff. And you'll be surprised that many of them actually do participate because it's been successful in many multinational companies already. So promoting health, mental health at work, leaders do make massive impact. It is so important for us to remember that what the leaders do, what they say, how they promote, do reduce a stigma, improve psychological safety. If the leaders are better at storytelling, you actually retain the staff better too. I want to talk a little bit about peer support program, because we know that there's peer support program for students. Then if you were to roll out in staff, does it work or not? And what is the impact? How do you measure the impact of a peer support program? We found that peer supporters are more likely to have improved depression and PERMA scores also. So they are peer support. We measure peer supporters in 2023. If you're not a peer supporter in 2023, what's your score? And then subsequently you become peer supporters in 2024, what your score is like. And we found that the participants who went through a peer support program have actually lower anxiety score and improved in engagement score. By how much? By 77% for depression score and 68% for engagement score. So they are 77% more likely to score to have a lower risk of depression compared to people who didn't go for peer support program. We also found that respondents who became peer supporters in 2024 more likely to have improved resilience score too. So peer support program is very powerful. By how much? 51% more likely to have a higher resilience score. So peer support program among staff members improves self-efficacy. It seems to help them in improving, manage their own personal energy too. It equip them with skills to manage their team. And you start to see powerful metrics being shifted. So peer support program, you might want to consider peer support program for the staff members if that hasn't been rolled out. But you should continue to measure the impact of the peer supporters. Yeah. Now, I want to come to the last part, which is the disruptive behavior. Because we talk about peer support program, we talk about mental health first aider, which equivalent, right? Somebody mentioned it just now in the presentation. We talk about psychological safety. Now, all this, we have heard about it before, but the concept of incivility is something that's gaining traction. We know that it is problematic, but we haven't paid attention enough. What is incivility or disruptive behavior that we're talking about? Well, in the context of the healthcare case, there's a lot of healthcare case study in terms of disruptive behavior. Because in the context of UK, it costs the NHS 2.28 billion per annum. It distracts attention, increases error, hinders open communication, reduces organizational performance, poorer quality of care to patient. So what is the top 3 disruptive behavior? Being rude, condescending remarks, facial expression, rolling eyes. Yeah. So these are the top 3 condescending and disruptive behavior that we observe, not just in the clinical setting, but I believe in your IHL setting, you have that too among your educators, especially your professors who think that they're here to do great work and everybody should always run on, to kowtow to them all the time. And that type of personality and behavior is highly disruptive. And in response, they will be quite rude to the staff. They don't see the staff as a team member, but actually as their hands and legs. So those are highly disruptive. Now, what are these? Where is this data from? This data is actually Singapore Hospital. Yeah, so we studied Singapore hospitals by NUS, not me, okay? But this is actually what happened. Singapore Hospital, because we do, and some of you do, also hire psychologists and counselors from the hospital setting too. And these are the things that they experience. But please, you need to take care of your own staff members well. Now, what is workplace incivility though? It is something, the distinguishing characteristic of incivility is that the intent to harm, as perceived through the eyes of an instigator, is ambiguous. So I want to harm you, but it is ambiguous. Unlike instigators of aggression, they can easily deny or bury any intent. When do you see it? I was like, I think too sensitive. No, that was not talking about you. Oh, it wasn't meant as an attack. Oh, I'm sorry it landed on you that way. But there was an intent to harm that already happened. Have you encountered that before? Have you witnessed that before? There's a lot of head nodding. So these are PAGRO, right? Or passive aggressiveness. And passive aggressiveness is something increasingly in the context of NUS we want to say no to. You want to be passive aggressive, I think you might want to check your emotions at the door. Yeah. So when we measure departments that has high incivility score, which means they practice all this rudeness and all those things, how does it impact? It actually impacts all the skills, from compassion to psychological safety, depression, stress, resilience, and even medical leave. So we compare departments that have got high incivility score and departments that have got low incivility score. Departments with low incivility score, they are 4.9 times, which means nearly 4 times more likely to have higher psychological safety. Not only that, they are 26% more likely to have staff not taking medical leave. In departments with high incivility, they are 26% more likely to take medical leave 3 days or more in a continuous stretch. We're looking at medical leave continuous stretch so 3 days or more, not 1 day here, 1 day there. No, that one we don't count. We want to be more specific. We say 3 days or more. Departments with high incivility, do the employees actually take more leave or not? The answer is yes. And it's 3 days or more continuous leave. So productivity actually got lost just by being rude, So what this has shown us is that being kind helps you save money. Don't be one kind. Therefore, this is the last few slides already. And we start to look at all these stigmatizing perceptions, strawberry generation, snowflake if you cannot take the heat, you get out of the kitchen. It's a natural selection. Now, this verbatim is actually from the voices of our public service managers when we were conducting workshop, and these are the things that came out when we talk about the new generation. Some of them say that I never had such a program back in the day. If I could survive, how come our people cannot? Now let's do something, okay? This is like talking to a person who is drowning and say, hey, I think you can do it also. Because my time I can, you also can. Yeah, this is the way of telling our next generation, this is, you can do it. Let's talk a little bit about this. Who made this statement? I'm going to read it out, okay? The children now love luxury, they have bad manners, contempt for authority, show disrespect for elders, and love chatter in place of exercise. Children are now tyrants, not the servants of their household, no longer rise when elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before company, gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, and tyrannize their professors or tyrannize your counselors. Who do you think made this statement? 1700. Wow, so very old, huh? Who else? Any? No, somebody said Lee Kuan Yew before in the past. I said, what, Lee Kuan Yew? But sounds like his tone. Okay, this is actually in Socrates, 4th BC. Yeah. So Socrates is talking about you all. Because you are after Socrates. Not only that, it's not only just Socrates, but Aristotle, World War I, World War II in the 90s. All these magazines start to talk about the next generation is stupid. And this is exactly what happened when the tendency that we tend to have is that the next generation is stupid, next generation is silly, soft, weak. But if you were to think about where you are right now, I think we have helped to make the ecosystem better, safer for our students, safer for our people. And then when you take a look at it, is that we are using our skill to solve the problems of our time. Our next generation, they are solving the skills of their time in the future, digital native, AI, or whatever it is. Many of us don't know coding over here. They are going to be change maker for us. Sometimes we do need a lot of reframing to help remind us what is the work that we are doing in university and IHL. And this is exactly what we think we need to be reminded on, starting from the staff and then all the way down to the students. Yeah, that's it for my presentation. I'm going to pass the time back to Diana.